Tourism becoming the world's third largest export industry after fuels and chemicals, food and automotive products, wildlife and nature protection should be considered a priority for the sector to thrive more. The Africa's Big Five wild animals found in Uganda are celebrated by World Animal Protection Organization since they are considered the most attractive, challenging and dangerous animals, including the African elephant, lion, leopard, African buffalo and rhinoceros, all seen in savanna parks. Talking about wildlife conservation, a practice of protecting plants, animal species and their habitats as part of the world's ecosystem. The major goal of wildlife conservation is to ensure the survival of these species and educate people on living sustainably with other species.
We know from history that some changes in the environment have happened as a result of natural causes, but there have also been those causes that have been aided or facilitated by man. And we are now saying that actually as human beings we are witnessing what we call the sixth extinction, whereby we are seeing the fastest rate of extinction of species, the fastest rate of environmental degradation, disappearance of habitats, the sparing of species, and all this largely aided by man. And some of the threats which are man-induced that affect wildlife, to say, look at the loss in terms of the forests. Even here in Uganda where we are sitting, Kampala used to be a natural forest.
The human population has grown exponentially over the past 200 years to more than 7 billion people today. This means natural resources are being consumed faster on the planet, which endangers the habitats and existence of various types of wildlife species around the world. Particularly animals and plants that may be displaced for land development or used for food or other human purposes are threats to wildlife, leading to introduction of invasive species from other parts of the world, climate change, pollution and hunting, fishing as well as poaching.
So those are some of the human-induced threats that affect wildlife, because in those forests there used to be animals. That is why maybe Chenjojo is called Chenjojo, because there used to be so many elephants. Maybe that is where Mbarara used to be called Remburara, because there was so much grassland in Mbarara, but you can no longer find it. So those are some of the man-made, man-induced threats that are affecting our wildlife. There is also overexploitation. That is, of course, that is habitat loss. But then there is actual extraction of animals from the wild and using them in different ways, either as pets, using them as traditional medicine, using them for other forms of entertainment, using them to get maybe their parts for decoration and all that, hunting and the rest. So extracting animals from the wild and using them by humans is one of the threats. But of course the other threats is some of the threats are also, if we look at infrastructure that we are putting around, all those developments are displacing animals. If we talk about, for instance, the Albertine area, where we are now as Uganda looking to develop our oil sector, it is one of the biodiversity hotspots. That's where you find the elephants, you find the chimpanzees, you find the giraffes, the entire of that Albertine area, elephants and the rest. And what are we doing? Of course, those human-induced developments are going to displace some animals. And this is the issues we are talking about, that human needs are impacting on the welfare of animals, denying them space, displacing them, but even to the extent of extracting them and killing them for purposes that could even be avoided.
Earth's natural resources include air, minerals, plants, soil, water and wildlife. The question is, has this generation appreciated nature and wildlife for future generations?
I think the human beings appreciate the role of animals in socioeconomic development, but I think they have appreciated it perhaps the wrong way. Or it's like they believe it is this and only this way that animals can contribute socioeconomic development without looking at other alternatives, without looking at more humane way of utilizing wildlife in ways that do not impact on the animals. I'll give an example. Our policies across the world, and of course across Africa, and even within Uganda, when it comes to utilization of wild animals, we call it sustainable use. We consume animals. We have consumptive and non-consumptive ways of using wildlife. And when we talk of consumptive ways, it means you are extracting these animals, you are getting them out of their habitats, and you're using them, you're killing them for something. You're killing them to meet a certain need. But maybe you have not looked at the alternatives. And there is a way you can still utilize those animals without taking a life. And for example, ecotourism is one of the, if done well, ecotourism is one of the ways that we can utilize wildlife, achieve socioeconomic development without killing the animals, as opposed to keeping these animals in captivity where they'll be exposed to all sorts of negative conditions, including denial of adequate food, denial of adequate space, denial of the freedom to move around, denial of the freedom for them to express their natural behaviors. And you're keeping them in captivity because you think that is the only way tourists will come and look at them and appreciate them. Or you think that's the only way you will use those animals to educate the young generation about conservation. So the appreciation is there, but I think it is so narrow, it's so limited, and as the policymakers and the agencies in charge of wildlife, I think we need to widen our scope and really look at wild animals in terms of what are the other intangible values that we can derive from these animals existing as sentient beings, as existing in their own right as animals. The intrinsic value, what is that intrinsic value that we can benefit from without having to take a life and kill these animals for direct consumption purposes?
Talking about lion as a special wildcat species often described as the king of the jungle. It is the most hunted wild animal by trophy hunters, referring it to what they consider the most challenging and dangerous animals to hunt on foot.
In Southern African countries, lions are being even poached from private farms, because in South Africa they farm lions. But even poaching has happened on private farms where lions have been poached for claws, for parts and all sorts of things. So most of these threats are indeed human, but also there is a reduction. I mentioned the habitat reduction. There are no spaces for lions. And of course there is also reduction in terms of food, prey. We call it prey. There's a reduction in terms of food. Why? When the cobs on which lions feed reduce in the environment, then of course lion numbers are prone to decrease. If we talk in terms of numbers, it's estimated that lions could be even less than 20,000 remaining in the wild. Leave alone those ones that are being kept in captivity, like say in South Africa, where between 8,000 to 10,000 lions are kept in captivity just for slaughter. But if we are talking about lions in the wild, the number is just a handful, around less than 20,000 in the wild. And the International Union for the Conservation of Nature has actually categorize them as vulnerable, meaning their numbers are dwindling, they are reducing. And even recently, Uganda released some statistics, and it was indicated that whereas the country has registered really positive developments in terms of recovery of the other species populations, the lion continues to face danger. Why? Because year in, year out, the numbers are simply dwindling. In many of the parks, especially Murchison Falls, Queen Elizabeth, lions are killed out of conflict with the pastoralists. So when lions come and attack domestic animals, before you know, the pastoralists will set poison, meat with poison. And many lions, including even other scavengers like hyenas, like vultures and other birds, that carnivorous birds that feed on carcasses, they will certainly die. But usually the lion is the target. Really what we call upon, first of all, the public is to appreciate that as it goes, the lion is the king of the jungle. The lion is one of our iconic species. The lion is Africa's heritage. Many cultures pride in the lion. But for the agencies that are in charge of really protecting, who have the mandate to protect these species, we are calling upon them to really step up efforts in terms of enforcement, in terms of protection, in terms of even raising awareness within those communities where we find a lot of conflicts between wildlife and lions and the people. Specifically the pastoral communities. If we are talking about Queen Elizabeth National Park, we are talking about, for instance, Hamukungu communities. We are talking about those fishing villages within the national park, where these communities are always in constant conflict with these lions, so that people are educated. But also recently, one of the incidents that happened in Queen Elizabeth National Park, where 3 lions were lost through, it is suspected that they were electrocuted by an electric fence around a certain hotel. Again, this is where we call upon authorities to ensure that they need to make sure that there are standards for some of those infrastructure developments in some of those protected areas that where lions live, so that if there's going to be an electric fence, then it has to be supervised with the right standard, and it has to make sure that it has the right current, so that it's not to the level which will end up executing these animals in a summary way.
As a charity organization campaigning for Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare, what should a country like Uganda expect from the program?
We don't have a physical office in Uganda. I'm here because I happen to be a Ugandan, and I happen to work from home from Uganda. But otherwise, as I said, we are a global organization, and our regional office for Africa is in Nairobi, and that is where we move to work in all the other African countries where we have programs. In the past, we've had joint events with the Uganda Wildlife Authority. A few years ago, before COVID-19, we used to work together to celebrate the World Wildlife Day. Wildlife Protection used to be one of the biggest players and sponsors of the World Wildlife Day. And on such a day, we would again engage with some of those authorities to really highlight the plight and the welfare of animals. Yes, we know their mandate is conservation, but we are telling them we need to conserve with compassion. You can't conserve what you don't love. You don't conserve the animals which you are going to shoot tomorrow in the name of sustainable use. So that is the message. And then we're also pushing for, let's look at those ways of utilizing wild animals without extracting them from the wild. Because there is this notion that if it pays, it stays. If it doesn't pay, then it can as well go. But I think from a As a conservationist, I think that is it's a wrong opinion, it's a wrong sort of philosophy, that if it doesn't pay, it shouldn't stay. Instead, we tell them, you look here, even animals, even when there is no financial value that you can physically derive from these animals, animals have what we call intrinsic value. The fact that they exist, the existence value, which you cannot attach you can't attach money. And I think that is where we conservation sometimes go wrong, when we attach money on each and every value when it comes to natural resources. And animals, because they are sentient beings, meaning sentient means they can feel pain, they can feel happiness, they can have emotions,
and to learn more about how they're
they can experience pain, they can build bonds and relationships, then it means we are not different from the animals. It's because we speak our language, they speak their language, and we don't speak each other's language. That is the difference.
As Uganda's tourism sector contributes to 3 high-priority goals of developing the country's economy, including generation of taxes, employment, and foreign exchange earnings, wildlife conservation must be taken as a priority. The fact that wild animals are more influential in the tourism sector.
We must look at where do we have our highest concentrations of these animals, or what we call biodiversity hotspots, where these animals are most abundant. At the same time, it is where these economic developments, most of which are harmful, are taking place. Talk of oil development, that's where they're happening. Talk of sugarcane plantations, they're happening in those habitats, which are supposed to be for wildlife. And of course, those impacts on the tourism sector. We've been deriving, say, ecotourism revenues from chimpanzees, and now all the forest patches in the Albertine Rift and the corridors are going to be destroyed or have been even destroyed. Then it becomes a challenge to sustain that sector. So therefore, as a country, we need to rethink our development path. We must rethink our development path and ensure that we really ensure that we safeguard this sector, which is generating so much into our economy, and really try to desist from walking the road or the journey that other countries have walked, where they have tried to invest in ways that impact on the sector negatively, and then it has become counterproductive. I was shocked actually that as Uganda we have licensed a facility which has started breeding white lions in captivity. When South Africa is closing down the captive lion breeding industry, we are opening. I then talk about, of course, trophy hunting. I know, of course, here we do not do trophy hunting for our lions, but I should say trophy hunting in all forms, for all species, is something that is internationally, it is gaining bad reputation, that tourists would not like to visit countries which are promoting trophy hunting as a form of tourism, as opposed to non-extractive ecotourism.
Trophy hunting is a big business globally, where trophy hunters wage ransoms of dollars to hunt wild animals, which declines the population of wildlife species, especially in Africa.
If we revisit the quote, I always like this quote by Mahatma Gandhi, that a nation's moral standing can be judged from the way it treats its animals. That is Ubuntu. Okay? It can be judged from the way it treats its animals. If we are this nation whereby we kick animals on the streets, we shoot at dogs, we cut our cows the way we want, then that speaks volumes about us as a nation. It speaks volumes about us as a nation. And that does not reflect the Ubuntu in us. People always wondered why a pastoralist will have thousands of cattle, but then we live in a grass-thatched hut. Because somebody will say, but he has so much, he's rich, why is he sleeping? But pastoralists look at animals as themselves, yes. They don't look at them in terms of money. They don't look at them in terms of money. They look at them at themselves. So that is actually how we can translate. If we are able to translate Ubuntu philosophy and apply it to animal welfare, then we realize that we need to live in harmony with nature. We live to live in harmony with all the other creatures.
Eleven countries in Africa allow trophy hunting, with South Africa taking the lead. Between 2005 and 2014, animal trophies from South Africa accounted for 32% of the total. In a single year, tourist hunters can kill around 105,000 animals, including around 3,800 buffaloes, 800 leopards, 600 lions, and 640 elephants. Critics say these numbers are unsustainable and damaging to the natural order, but supporters say the revenue from huntings can reverse the trend of the declining wildlife population. According to a Safari Club International study, more than 18,000 hunters from around the world spend more than $325 million on hunting in Africa annually. The price of a zebra or a giraffe is approximately $8,000. A Cape buffalo brings in $20,000. A leopard hunt can cost as much as $28,000, but a lion hunt costs $100,000 per cat. Although lions and elephants are marked as vulnerables according to conservation status, that money, some may say that it can be put to good use. For example, in Tanzania, income from hunting accounts only for 3% of tourism industry, as well as neighboring Kenya, where the tourism industry has grown 40 times since hunting was outlawed in 1977. They believe animals can be of more value to Africa's tourism industry, alive than dead.
The world should begin to embrace the whole issue around the rights of nature. The rights of nature. We know they are human rights, but there is also the rights of nature. Because the moment we see nature as not having its own right to exist as nature, then we begin to make those mistakes of saying we can manipulate nature the way we want. The other day we saw floods sweeping animals in eastern Uganda. It's because we have not respected the rights of nature. And I think we need to put the rights of nature at the center of development. That is when we realize that as human beings, we are headed for a catastrophe if we see ourselves as separate from the rest of nature.